You liked the first video about our spider so much that we had to make a sequel. And now you will see what happened in our terrarium over the past month, as well as a small experiment with the spider silk. After the first cocoon appeared in the terrarium, we were already prepared for the fact that the spider would soon die, because usually that's how it goes in nature. However, on the contrary, she started hunting with great appetite and has almost fattened up to her original size. And one morning, another cocoon appeared on the lid of the terrarium. It was just as big as the first one and was located in the opposite corner of the terrarium. At that point, we were still hoping that the spiderlings would be born, as we had been told, no more than a month after the cocoon was created. But after studying this species, we realized that we won't see spiders before spring. And despite being convinced that after the second cocoon the female spider would definitely go to spider heaven, we continued to feed her plump moths and give her water with a stick. A couple of days later, we managed to capture the entire process of creating a new web. Any web starts with connecting 3 threads in the shape of a Y, then the spider creates a small area in the center where it will be comfortable sitting and attaches additional threads to it. Then, when the main framework of the web is ready, the spider starts to produce a different type of silk. These threads are less strong, but they are coated with glue, and it's these that the silly insects get stuck to when they fall into the web. In general, the spider's web should be perfect, with equal intervals between threads and always contain the same number of radii, knots and curls in the spiral. But for some reason, ours isn't like that. Maybe it's because our female spider is missing one of her legs? The spider came to us already as a small disabled one. We can only guess at what stage of her life she lost her leg. By the way, even though all spiders are predators, there are plenty of creatures in nature that want to eat them too. They are much more attractive than insects to birds, mice and lizards that want to eat. Spiders contain taurine, like in energy drinks. In our terrarium, the spider was the only predator. Once the web was done, we rewarded her. The spider wrapped the prey in her natural packaging. But in our terrarium, the only predator was the spider itself. And as soon as the web was finished, we decided to reward her for her hard work and tossed in all those moths. When the prey was paralyzed by her venom for some reason, the female spider decided to spin around with it on a single silk thread and wrap it up in her natural packaging. The thread she created easily held the weight of a pregnant female spider who had given birth twice, along with the extra weight of a fat moth. When the prey was paralyzed by her venom, for some reason, the female spider decided to spin around with it on a single silk thread and wrap it up in her natural packaging. The thread she created easily held the weight of a pregnant female spider who had given birth twice, along with a fat moth on top. That's how we came up with the idea to test the web for strength. By the way, this time we managed to capture for the first time how the spider gets rid of the remains of its prey that it couldn't digest. Our spider spent over an hour eating a moth, with the web holding the prey in place. Once consumed, the spider hung the remains on the web, cleaned its legs, then kicked the bundle to the terrarium's bottom. Besides the moth, small insects attracted by light flew into the web, and the spider shook it to locate its next meal. Then it took that little bundle again and suddenly, to our surprise, just kicked it to the bottom of the terrarium. In addition to the moth, many small insects flew into the web towards the light, and the spider began to shake the web with sharp movements to make them twitch and understand from the vibrations where to go for prey. This little green bug started to twitch, giving itself away and becoming an addition to the spider's dinner. To allow the spider to drink, we sprayed its web with water and started thinking about how to measure its strength. In that very bowl where we placed the spider on the first night, it was running around chaotically and connected some stones and branches with its web. And we were very surprised that the thinnest, barely visible threads easily held up a whole bunch of stones. Of course, each of them weighs about 1 gram on average, but the web is many times thinner than a human hair. And we were very surprised that the thinnest, barely visible threads easily held up a whole bunch of stones. Of course, the weight of each of them is about 1 gram on average, but the web is many times thinner than a human hair. We definitely wouldn't have been able to tie any kind of weight to one almost invisible thread of web. But we were lucky that during the time the spider lived in the terrarium, a lot of web had accumulated on its lid. We carefully took it out from there and twisted it into this little rope. Next, we needed to make a basket that we would hang on the web and load until the web breaks. From a piece of dense foam, we cut out a small cube and using a syringe dripped solvent onto the foam. As you know, the foam starts to melt instantly from the solvent. And in this way we managed to make a depression in the future basket. And yes, it was easier, neater, and more unusual than just cutting it out. The toothpick was the perfect size and the handle was made from it. and a piece of wool thread, we ended up with an extremely light and spacious basket. We threaded the string made of web under the handle and folded it in half, and it easily held several grams, which is how much our invention weighed. And we securely glued the two free ends of the web with tape. Even the spider itself couldn't have made it more reliable. Our construction was already ready, and we brought a handful of the same stones and started placing them inside one by one. After a couple of dozen stones, the basket noticeably got heavier, but the web made by the spider was still holding strong. But after a couple of minutes, we ran out of stones. We didn't expect the web to hold that much weight, so we had to go get a new batch of stones. And I guess we should have expected that, because spider silk is an incredibly strong material. The web of the Nephila spiders from Polynesia is 5 times stronger than silk. Threads of web that are 1/10 of a millimeter thick can hold 80 kilograms of weight. Meanwhile, we were loading in new stones and the basket was already full and overflowing. And then our experiment was interrupted. We didn't immediately realize what had happened, as the web looked intact, just like before, and even the thinnest part of the rope wasn't torn. But when we tried to lift the basket, everything became clear. By lifting it by the remaining intact web, we were able to add a few more stones, but then the web broke again. Most likely, this little rope wasn't woven from continuous long strands of silk, and the breaks occurred at the points where the ends of different threads connected. So they just unraveled and came apart, but they didn't actually tear. Nevertheless, the spider silk rope held a weight of 52 grams, which is about the same as a chicken egg. So they just unraveled and came apart, but they didn't actually tear. Nevertheless, the spider silk rope held a weight of 52 grams, which is about the same as a chicken egg. You know, to be honest, we didn't tell you everything about the spider. The thing is, 16 days after creating the second egg sac, the female spider laid the third one. For some reason, she didn't encase it in the web as tightly as the others, and on one side we can see that it has a yellow-orange color and a spherical shape. And when you look closely, you can even see the individual eggs as little bumps sticking out at the edges. But we didn't get to enjoy it for long, because the third egg sac was part of a clever spider escape plan. After laying her third batch of eggs, the female spider lost weight like never before, and, abandoning her young, squeezed through a very narrow gap between the lid and the slightly chipped edge of the glass. The terrarium with her was outside and we couldn't find her. But maybe it's even better this way, because now, after laying 3 egg sacs, she can die peacefully without any extra eyes on her. By the way, did you ask if we gave her a name? And yes, after she caught her first moth and settled in our terrarium, we named her Iriska. We definitely didn't expect that the video about her would be watched by more than 500,000 people. Now we just have to wait for spring or maybe even summer, and all this time keep her egg sacs safe until the spiderlings hatch. We don't yet know whether we should bring the cocoons into a warm place or leave them to overwinter outside in natural conditions. But if you know what conditions they need, please write about it in the comments. After all, each of these egg sacs contains several hundred spiders of a rare species, and we wouldn't want to accidentally kill them due to a silly mistake. Thank you so much if you've watched up to this point. Give us a thumbs up and make sure you're subscribed to the channel, and then there will be even more videos like this.